What is up, you spooky bitches? We're back, baby, and we got another episode of the Hello Sidney podcast here, a podcast for horror lovers where we discuss any and all things horror, and it's me, your girl, Sidney. And this is a very exciting episode because it is our first extra episode of 2025. So last episode, I told you guys I want to put out more content this year on this pod. So we are here with an extra episode, and not only is it an extra episode, but you might also be able to see me. I don't really know how this works, to be honest. This is my first video episode, so we're going to see how this goes with all the editing and whatnot, but fuck it. 2025, new year, new me, new us as a whole. So if you can see me, what is up? Here I am. Welcome to my crib. So this is also our first episode where we're doing Clown Month. And the reason that we're doing Clown Month is because my next episode, which is going to be a regular Wednesday episode, we're covering Terrifier, the only three Terrifier movies. And as you can see right here, if you can see me, I love Terrifier so much. I have Art and the Little Pale Girl hanging up on my wall. So I'm very much looking forward to the Terrifier episode. And that inspired me to make the theme of this month Clown Month. So without further ado, we're talking about what I believe to be a very underrated clown movie in this episode, and that is Eli Roth's Clown from 2014. So he did not direct this movie, but he did produce it, and I would argue that this movie is the scariest iteration of a clown you've ever seen in a horror movie. And I'm saying that even scarier than Art the Clown or Pennywise, which I have Pennywise up on my wall as well. And the reason for that is because this is like a demon straight out of hell. Think of a demon out of hell dressing as a clown. That is exactly what this thing is. I think this is so terrifying. As somebody who fucking hates clowns, I think this clown is so terrifying, and people don't necessarily give this movie the respect that it deserves. So this movie was filmed in 2012. It technically released in 2014, but we, the audiences, didn't see it until 2016. And even then, it's been kind of hard to find. They recently put it on Netflix, so that's kind of why I got the idea to do this episode, and that's why we're talking about it today. And it's still on Netflix if you still want to go watch it after this. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. And if you're watching this on video, yes, this is how I do it with my phone. Super fucking not professional. But again, we're just chilling, guys. This is not a professional production. I'm literally just sitting here chilling on my couch recording with my laptop. So give me a break, okay? So let's get into it. Clown 2014. Its runtime is about an hour and 39 minutes long. And this movie opens up and we're very clearly at a child's birthday party. And the theme of this birthday party is clown theme. And we're going to learn that this birthday party is for this little boy named Jack. So we're here. It's Jack's birthday. He wanted a clown themed birthday. His mother is here throwing the party. She's cooking. She's doing all this hostess stuff. And her friend Denise comes into the kitchen and is like, okay, well, you need a drink for doing all this. And Meg at this point reveals to her friend Denise that she is pregnant, but she hasn't told Kent, her husband, yet. So she gives her husband Kent a call and is like, when are you coming to this party? Because it turns out that he's still at work. But before she's able to call him, she gets a call herself, and it turns out that it's the clown that they hired for this birthday party completely canceling on them. So now she calls Kent and she's freaking out. She's like, I don't know how they double book a clown, but the clown's not coming. That was the whole point of this whole entire party. He loves clowns. He wanted a clown themed party. And now we don't have a motherfucking clown come into the clown party. Her friend Denise, by the way, is the only one that's like, clowns freak me out, and even when I was 7, they freaked me out. Your kid's kind of a fucking weirdo, which totally agree. #FTK. So now we cut to Kent, and we see that Kent is a realtor, and he's at this house that he's selling, and he gets this call from his wife, and he's all worried too because they obviously want to throw a good birthday party for their son. So he decides to start looking through the closet of this house because we're going to learn that this house belongs to somebody who passed away, so they didn't get to clear out their belongings, so there's still stuff in the house. So he's looking through the closet, and he's trying to look for something that he can wear, and nothing's working. And then all of a sudden, he looks in the mirror, and he turns, and he sees this chest, and he looks in the chest, and inside of it is this old-timey clown costume, and it looks faded, but it's still perfectly intact. So Kent sees this and he's all excited, and sure enough, the next scene we get is him showing up to his own house to Jack's birthday party dressed as this clown, and he calls himself Dumbo, and Jack is just having the time of his life. Meg, his wife, is like, oh, thank God Kent saved the day. He's obviously a great husband, great father. We love Kent, and just spoiler alert, he does not deserve anything that happens to him in this movie. My boy gets done absolutely dirty. So eventually the party's over and Jack falls asleep. So they go to put him to bed. And then Kent and Meg are talking on the couch. And Kent is still completely dressed up as this clown. So he has the clown suit on. He has his clown makeup on, this wig, the red nose, the whole nine. So he really got into this. And Meg goes to put Jack to bed. And the two of them are kissing and they talk about how, oh, you don't want it, like Kent kind of jokes with her. She's like, oh, what? You don't want to make a little clown baby right now? Again, not knowing that she's already pregnant. So Kent falls asleep on the couch and the next morning he wakes up still completely in this clown attire and he goes to try and take the wig off and it's stuck. He cannot get this wig off of his head. So he's like, what the fuck? So Meg comes down and Kent says to her, like, this wig is stuck. I can't seem to get it off. And Meg kind of plays it off like, oh, well, you shouldn't have slept in it. Like maybe it wouldn't have been stuck. But then they move past it. They don't really think a whole lot of it yet. And she asks Kent to take Jack to school. So Jack puts on a hat, he puts on a coat, and he tries to wash the makeup off of his face, but his face is like stained. But eventually he gets in the car, he takes Jack to school, and as he gets to school, his nose is still on because he cannot get this nose off, and he still has this paint on his face, even though he just washed it off. And he ends up bringing Jack to school, and the teachers and like all the kids in the playground are kind of like giving him weird looks because he's dressed like a fucking clown at like 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. Like, what are you doing, my guy? And then Kent goes to work. So he shows up to one of the houses that he's selling and he sees this crew that's supposed to be working on the house and they just look up at him and they're like, why are you dressed as a clown? And Kent kind of plays it off like, oh, do you guys have kids? Because you might get it if you do. Otherwise, you probably don't. So then we cut to inside the house and Kent is in the bathroom and he is furiously washing his face off in the sink. Again, just trying to get this makeup off. And at this point, the makeup does come off, but the nose still will not come off. So he's still really confused about this whole thing. And then he starts pulling at the sleeves of the costume. And now it's long sleeves, so it's completely down to his wrists and he's pulling at it and it will not budge. So he's confused as fuck. And eventually he looks in one of the drawers of the bathroom and he sees that there's a box cutter in there. So he's like, perfect. I'll just cut the fucking thing off. So as he's cutting at the wrists of his costume, he cuts his wrist and starts bleeding everywhere. So now he's making a mess. He's trying to clean it up. He's trying to wrap his wrist in like toilet paper because again, this is a house that's empty. So there's nothing in here. But that still doesn't turn him off from trying to get this costume off right now. So he ends up going out to where all of his crew is working and he gets this power saw. And he goes back into the bathroom and he straight up puts this power saw like right here in between where the costume and his neck is. And at one moment, like you think he just slashed his wrist, this fucking idiot is going to slash his own throat open, but he doesn't. So he turns the power saw on and this thing still will not budge. And it's to the point where the costume straight up breaks the power saw. Like the thing literally just snaps in half, does not budge, not even a cut, nothing. This costume is like glued onto him. So day goes by, Kent ends up going home and he sees Meg and Meg is like, why the fuck do you still have that on? And he's like, I physically cannot get it off. I've been trying all day. I don't know what to do. He's obviously all sorts of stressed out. And Meg at this point is laughing about it. And he kind of laughs about it too. Like, oh, this is so stupid. And Meg ends up taking him up to the bathroom and she pulls out this thing of tools that she has, like these medical tools. I believe she ends up being a dentist. We hear that like briefly at the end. So she has all these medical tools and she's like, don't worry, this is what I do for a living. I'll take care of it. And the first thing she goes to pull off is his nose. And as she's trying to pull this nose off, he is like screaming in pain. And eventually she's like, okay, you know what? Like a Band-Aid, we just got to fucking do it. So she grabs this tool, these like pliers, and she braces herself, like gets a good grip, and he braces himself, and she manages to pull this nose off of him. But with the nose, the fake nose, comes off half of Kent's real nose, or at least like the tip of his skin. And he's screaming, he's bleeding everywhere, and in the chaos, the fake nose drops to the ground. And now their dog comes up to the nose and eats it. Straight up just fucking eats the thing. So the dog eats and swallows this fake clown nose and they don't even really pay attention to it because, again, Kent is in pain. And then Meg looks at his hair and she's looking closer at it and she's like, did you dye and perm your hair? And he's like, no, this is a wig. And she's like, no, it's not. Like, this is in your scalp. So this wig has now become a part of him. So Ken ends up going to the doctor to get his nose treated because, again, like the whole tip of his nose has come off. He's bleeding. So Kent goes to the doctor because, again, like half of his nose is now ripped off physically. So he's at the doctor being treated and the doctor is asking him questions like, oh, what kind of makeup do you usually use? Like thinks he's like a fucking full-time clown. And he's like, I'm not a clown. Like this, I can't get this thing off. So Ken ends up going home and he's in the shower and we hear that his stomach is growling. So eventually he goes down to the kitchen and he's like eating cake with his hands like a feral animal and just like grabbing pieces of cake and just shoving it into his mouth, and his stomach is still growling. So this guy's obviously starving despite the fact that he's eating cake with his hands. So the next day, Meg comes downstairs and we see that Kent has left her a note that says, "Gonna figure this out." And she looks up and also sees that the kitchen is an absolute mess. Like, he has completely ripped through this kitchen, eating everything in sight. Like, there's remnants of food everywhere. So Kent ends up going to his car and he calls his office and he asks his secretary to find the property files of the house that he found the costume in. And he's like, "Can you locate the previous owner?" So as he's doing this, he goes to the house where he found the costume and he goes to look in the chest where he found it. But this time he sees that this chest is chained to the wall. So that's never a good sign. There is this thick chain connecting this chest to the wall, and it has the initials KC written on the front of it. So then we see Kent in this house, and he has a pair of scissors, and he's cutting off his hair, which is supposed to be a wig, but is now literally his hair. He's cutting it off, and he's trying to dye it, and nothing is working. So eventually he just puts a hat on, and he has a jacket on, and his nose is bandaged. So he's looking like shit. Like, this guy is looking like he's been through it, because he has. But he ends up going to his realty office and he's grabbing the property files that he asked for. And as he's doing this, he's coughing and he sounds like he's sick. And his secretary goes up to him and he coughs this like dark mucus into her face by accident. And it's like, it's a foul scene, honestly. Like, this shit just looks disgusting. I would have to like shower for 73 hours if this happened to me. It's fucking gross. So Ken ends up going to this diner because, again, this motherfucker is still hungry. And he's looking through his property files at the diner. And in the booth in front of him, there's a kid that pops its head up and it's looking at him. And as he makes eye contact with this kid, his stomach growls louder. So do you see where we're going here? So Ken ends up going to this other location, which is this costume shop, and he asks the woman that's working there, like, "Look at this costume. Can you give me any information on it?" And she ends up giving him a list of shops and people that might sell costumes like this, because she's like, "It's really old-timey and vintage. Like, we don't have shit like that here, but these people might." So one of the initials that he finds on this list is KC, and it ends up their last name is Carlson. So he's like, okay, that's got to be my person, and it's Carlson Costume. So he calls them and he talks to this person and he's like, "Hey, I'm calling about a clown suit that I found in Martin Carlson's basement." And the person on the other end of the line immediately starts frantically telling him, "Do not touch that suit. Where are you? I'm coming to you right now. Just whatever you do not touch that suit." And Kent pauses and he just says, "I'm wearing it." So the voice on the other line goes silent at this point and then comes back and is like trying to play it off. And he's like, "Oh, I was just saying that because it's very fragile. You know, don't worry about it. I'm coming to meet you. Like, where are you?" And Kent is like, "Fragile? Like, that's really weird because I'm actually having a really tough time getting it off." And the person on the other line, who his name's going to end up being Bert, and Bert ends up saying, "Oh, you know, it's the fibers and it's old, so when you sweat," he like makes up a bullshit excuse, but it makes Kent feel better. Kent's like, "Oh, good. Like, I thought I was going crazy at this point, and that makes me feel a bit better." So Bert is like, "Yep, no worries. Why don't you come meet me at my warehouse and we'll get that suit off of you immediately." So Kent's like, "Fuck yeah. Like, finally I'm going to get this shit off of me. Let's go." So he goes to this warehouse and at first it's like there's nobody there. There's a bunch of mannequins. It's like eerie as fuck because, again, it's a costume shop. And eventually this guy Bert ends up popping up on him and they introduce themselves and Bert gives Kent tea and cookies and whatnot, makes him feel welcome. And Kent really is only concerned with getting this costume off of him, but Bert is concerned with giving him the history of clowns, because Bert begins to tell Kent how that old costume that you're wearing is from the Nordic regions, and the original clown at that time was actually not funny at all. It is not what it has become today. And it wasn't until all these years later that it became a character out of something evil. And Kent, again, is trying to deflect. He's like, "Okay, so how are we going to get this thing off of me?" And Bert, again, keeps telling him this story. He's like, "The true origin of the clown is the cloyne." And he shows him these drawings of this just evil-looking clown. And Bert explains how this clown used to live in the mountains and it had skin as white as snow and a red nose because his nose would blister from the cold. And eventually the clown would lure 5 children into its cave, 5, one for every month of winter. And over centuries, the legend of the clown was forgotten and he became the clown that we know today, and it became a way to entertain children. And if only they knew. And that's incredibly fucking weird. And I have not looked up to see if this is true because quite frankly, I'm terrified too, because I fucking hate clowns as it is. So if there is some like dark history behind it, I mean, no offense if you know anybody that's a clown, I don't trust them. I don't fucking trust them. Why are you dressing up as a clown? They're scary. They've never been funny. They've never been entertaining to me. They're fucking scary, okay? So Kent's listening to this because he doesn't have a choice but to if he wants to get this costume off, but all of a sudden he starts to get really dizzy and his vision starts to blur, and sure enough, he passes out, and we realize that the tea that Bert has given him was drugged. He's just been drugged. Now, when Kent wakes up, he is strapped to a table, and we see Bert sharpening an axe. And like Kent can kind of see what's happening behind him, and he's like all sorts of confused, and he's like, what the fuck? And Bert looks up at him and he's like, oh shit, like that tea was supposed to keep you asleep for hours. Sorry, but decapitation is the only way to stop the demon. So I'm so sorry that I have to do this, but, and he raises this butcher knife up. And as he's going to bring it down, Kent is struggling and he manages to get loose. And as he brings the butcher knife down, which he went to go bring it down on his head to decapitate him, he instead brings it down into Kent's shoulder as Kent gets up off the table and pushes him out of the way. So now a struggle kind of ensues between the two of them. Bert's on the floor and he's like, I'm sorry, but it's the only way. And they're screaming at each other, and eventually Bert finally looks at him and is like, it's not a costume, it is skin and hair of a demon. That's why he can't get this shit off, because it's not a fucking costume, it is the literal skin of a demon, and it has now become his skin. So Ken obviously thinks that this guy is insane. He's like, this is absolutely not possible. And he ends up running home, and he runs into his house frantically and is screaming for Meg to call 911. He's like, call 911. This guy thinks I'm a demon. He tried to kill me. Like, look at what he did to my shoulder, shows him his wound. And then he looks up and realizes that Meg's friend Denise and her husband, as well as Meg's father, are there. And they're looking at him like he's fucking crazy because, mind you, Kent is still dressed like a clown. So Kent, again, is frantically trying to explain to Meg, like, he tied me up, he tried to kill me, and Meg is like, who? And sure enough, Kent brings Meg out to the car, and he has Bert Carlson tied up in the back seat. So again, he's trying to explain frantically what happened. They think he's insane, and Denise's husband tries to go to Kent, and just be like, pull this fucking wig off, like enough of this shit. And he tries to pull the wig off, and of course it will not come off. And Kent goes to push him away, but suddenly has this like superhuman strength and just snaps this dude's arm in half. So now he's on the ground, he's screaming, and Kent in the chaos just gets in the car and tells Meg, meet me at the police station, and drives away. So he leaves them behind frantic, Denise's husband on the floor writhing in pain, and Meg confused as fuck. So Kent is driving down the road with Bert in the backseat, and he's like, Bert, you are going to jail, man. Like, fuck you. Like, basically telling him he's fucked for what you just did to me. And Bert is saying, like, through his restraints, I'm trying to help you. It's the only way. And as he's saying this, Kent once again starts coughing, and he spits up that mucus again. But this time, it's not just brown like it looked like before. It's fucking rainbow colored. Rainbow colored mucus. He spits it onto his front windshield. And then all of a sudden, Kent's fingers start cracking and elongating. It's almost like a werewolf transformation, but instead of a werewolf, it's a clown demon transformation. So he's starting to transform. So as this is happening, Kent is looking down confused as fuck, and Bert comes up from behind and manages to start like strangling Kent from the back seat. But as this is happening, Kent's toes are also growing and elongating, which is causing him to step on the pedal more, and he cannot stop. He physically cannot stop the car, and eventually he comes up with the idea of pulling the emergency brake, which he does, but this causes the car to crash. So he gets out of the car and he pulls Bert out, and Bert is injured from the crash, and Bert just keeps telling him over and over, like, kill yourself, it's the only way. And as he's saying this, Kent's stomach once again starts to growl. And Bert passes out, and Kent walks over to this car that has stopped, like this car has stopped to help them. And he looks at the car and he sees all these kids in the back seat. And again, his stomach starts to growl even louder. And he looks at these kids super menacingly. Meanwhile, Bert behind him has regained consciousness and is once again screaming, "Kill yourself, it's the only way." And Kent, in the chaos, runs off because he has nowhere else to go, and he runs into the woods. So now we cut to Meg, and Meg's at the police station, and she's telling the officers like what happened. They're asking what Kent was last wearing, so she describes it because again, he has the clown outfit on, but he's wearing a jacket and a hat to cover it up. So Meg goes back home and she's talking to her dad, and we've kind of gotten this idea throughout the whole movie that her dad is not really a fan of Kent. Like, he doesn't really approve of Kent at all. Which, I mean, other than the whole clown situation and all this weird shit, like, Kent seems to be a good fucking dad. So, like, what's your issue, my guy? So he tells Meg, like, I want you and Jack to come stay with me. And she's like, no, like, I gotta stay here for when Kent comes back. And now Jack hears all of this and he's asking his mom, like, is this my fault? So, like, he's feeling guilty for no reason. So Meg puts him to bed. Poor Jack. Like, he doesn't deserve any of this shit either. So now we cut back to Kent, who, again, is in the middle of the woods. And he comes across this group of boys who are camping out. And you can tell they're like Boy Scouts or something. And one of them ends up going out of his sleeping bag in the night because he has to clean his plate. And as he does that, he sees Kent lingering in the darkness of the woods. And because he's a stupid kid, he decides to go up to this random man in the middle of the woods, which, again, even kids, I feel like, have better instincts, but what the fuck do I know? And as he's going towards Kent, Kent asks him, do you have any food? And his stomach starts growling. And the kid goes up to him and pulls something out of his pocket and, like, offers him some food. But as he goes to hand it to him, Kent instead grabs this child's arm and straight up bites his fingers off and swallows them. I don't know if he swallows them. We don't see it, but I'm assuming he fucking eats and swallows them. This kid is now fingerless on one hand, has a couple fingers missing, but he manages to run off. So he runs off back to his group screaming, and Kent goes God knows where. So the next day, Jack is at school, Kent is still not back home, and we see Meg at school as well, and she's having a conversation with like the principal or with Jack's teacher or somebody, and she goes to Jack and she says, okay, me or Denise are going to pick you up from school. If Daddy shows up, do not go with him, and what do you do? And Jack says, if he comes here, I tell the teacher. So this is the whole plan. If Kent comes to school to get Jack, Jack is supposed to tell the teacher, who's then going to call Meg, and Jack is not supposed to go with him. Because again, Meg obviously knows he's not acting like himself. He's being super weird and she doesn't want him alone with Jack. So Meg ends up leaving, and as she does, Jack, like, these kids come up to Jack and just start bullying him because they're fucking losers. Like, what? What are you doing? So the next morning, Kent wakes up somewhere in the middle of the woods, like under a bridge. Again, still fully in this jacket and hat. He still has this clown makeup on his face. And now Meg goes back home and she looks down at this book, and it turns out that it's the book that Bert was showing Kent with like all these evil illustrations of this clown eating, the cloyne really eating children. And it turns out that Kent brought it home, and Meg now sees it for the first time, and she starts looking through it and she kind of closes it and moves on. She's like, I can't fucking look at this. So then we cut back to Kent, who has now made his way to a gas station, and he's in the gas station bathroom, and he is just looking worse and worse. Like, this man is deteriorating. He's looking at himself in the mirror, and all of a sudden he starts just gagging, and he ends up throwing up his own teeth. Like, he spits up his own teeth, so there's like bloody teeth in the sink. And then all of a sudden he hears a school bus show up. School bus pulls up outside, and Kent ends up hiding in one of the stalls as a bunch of kids run into the bathroom. And one kid just starts banging on the door that Kent is in, which, like, dude, obviously fucking occupied. And Kent is just looking like he's in physical pain. Like, he looks like he's suffering. And now we kind of understand that it's because he, as this demon clown, has this craving for these children. And Kent, as a human, is trying to suppress that, but the cloyne is coming through. So he looks like he's physically in pain. And eventually we see one of the kids like climb the stall and is looking at him, and the kid starts screaming because, again, Kent looks fucking scary at this point. He does not look like a normal person. And Kent ends up running out, and he doesn't hurt any of these kids. He fights it off this time, and he runs out of the bathroom. So then we cut to Kent on a bus. He's taking a bus somewhere. And again, he's just looking worse and worse. And he eventually ends up getting to this apartment building that has his realty sign in it. So we know that this is one of his properties that he's selling. So he knows that it's empty and he ends up going to stay there. And as he's going to unlock this door, this little kid comes up to him. And this kid introduces himself as Robbie. And I don't know why the kids in this movie have like zero survival instinct and also aren't immediately horrified by the look of this man slash creature, but Robbie is trying to have a full-on fucking conversation with this guy. And he's like, "Are you hungry?" Because he hears his stomach growl. He's like, "I have Cookie Crisp and I have this," and he's listing all this food that he has as Kent is just like staring at him because again, we know the cloyne wants to eat the kid. So Kent once again looks like he's struggling to resist, but ultimately he tells Robbie, "Stay away," and he goes inside of the apartment. And he puts down his phone, and he also puts down a gun that he had taken from Bert earlier. So Kent is in this room just looking again, absolutely horrific, and he gets a knock on the door, and when he answers it, it's this stupid little fucking kid, Robbie. Like, that wasn't enough for you to say, like, maybe I shouldn't talk to this strange man that looks like he's fucking dying, that looks like a demon clown. So Robbie knocks on the door, and Robbie this time has cereal and he's like, "Here, you want some cereal?" And Kent again just like slams the door in his face and his stomach keeps growling louder and louder at the sight of this kid. And we notice that he now has like slits in the side of his mouth, almost like Joker style. So he again is still transitioning into this full cloned form, which we're going to see at the end. And again, it is downright fucking terrifying, to be honest. So back at the house, Meg and Jack notice that the dog is acting weird. Do you get it? Do you remember what the dog ate earlier? So the dog is acting weird. He's getting like more and more vicious almost. He's seeming kind of aggressive. He's barking at them. And Jack specifically points out at this point, he's like, "Is it because he ate Dad's clown nose?" And I think at this point it clicks in Meg's head and it clicks in all of our heads. So Kent ends up calling Meg at this point and she answers and Kent just sounds so defeated and he's like, "I'm so sorry, but this is the only way." And he hangs up. And we cut to the apartment that he's in and he's sitting in the bathroom and he holds up the gun and he puts the gun in his mouth and he pulls the trigger. And the backdrop is a white wall. And this is a really cool shot because instead of spewing blood all over the place, what gets spewed all over the place is this rainbow liquid. And it's such a good shot. And again, it's just so creative because again, he's now the cloyne. Like the cloyne is completely taken over him. He is no longer human. And this proves it. What proves it even more is he falls for a second and then he sits right back up like nothing happened. So he can't even kill himself like that. Like the only way, like Bert said, is decapitation. So we cut back to the house and we see Meg talking to Denise and she's telling Denise, "You know what? Last time we got in a fight, he stayed at one of his properties. So that's what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go look at every single property that he is selling and see where he's at because it has to be at one of them." And of course she knows her husband and she's right. So then we cut to Kent and we hear this song playing and it's like the King of Clowns, like it's a clown song. And we see Kent in this hardware store and he's buying like these 2 power saws and like tape and a bunch of shit. And we see Meg at the same time going to different properties to see if he's there. And meanwhile, Kent goes back to the apartment and he's rigging up this contraption with both saws. And he has both saws like facing each other and he sits in a chair and he goes to fall backwards. So again, Kent remembers that the only way to kill himself and to get out of this is decapitation. So at this point, he's trying to decapitate himself. And I would never have the balls to do this either. And we see that Kent doesn't really either because he sits in the chair and he goes to lean back, but then he fakes himself out and he sits back up. And he's breathing heavy and he's all nervous. So he tries again, he panics, he comes back up, and then he tries one more time. And this time he's going to fall, but at the last minute he panics and he falls sideways. And when he falls sideways, he knocks over the saw. And it's at this exact moment that this stupid little kid, Robbie, decides to break into this apartment or open the door to this apartment. And he opens the door and he says, "Mr. Clown." But at the moment he walks in, that saw falls to the side and it shoots out and it shoots directly through Robbie and fucking kills him. Which, like, obviously I'm not saying he deserved it, but kids, if you're listening, this is why you mind your own fucking business. So Kent is devastated because, again, he still has enough of his humanity to understand that this child just died. And he's looking over his body and he's like crying and he's devastated. But then all of a sudden his stomach starts growling. And he gets some of Robbie's blood on his fingers and he goes to lick the blood off. And then we cut. So we don't exactly see what happens inside, but outside we see Meg finally get to this property. She pulls up and she goes to the apartment door and she puts the keys in the lock, starting to unlock it. And she just hears Kent's voice on the other side saying no. And at this point, they have this like really heartfelt conversation. And she's like, I need you, Jack needs you, and I'm pregnant. So this is how she breaks to her husband that she's pregnant. Like he didn't even know at this point. So Kent ends up eventually opening the door and she sees what he looks like. And again, he is just declining by the fucking second. Like he is looking scarier and scarier. So she sees what he looks like and she literally just gasps. She's like, what the fuck? And he's just like, take me home. So he goes with her, they get in the car, and then we cut to inside the apartment where we just see blood and bones. He ate Robbie completely and just left his bones. They end up bringing him home, and Meg knows better than to just like leave him out in the open because she obviously still knows that something's up. So the two of them end up going into the basement and Meg chains him up. She like chains him to this column in the basement, and he says to her like, I can feel myself changing no matter what I say or do. Do not let me out. Do not untie me and do not let me out of the basement. So she agrees and she ends up going back upstairs and she once again sees that book. And inside of this book, she looks through it a bit more and she sees this article about Bert and his brother, Marty, who we know Marty was the guy who owned the house where the clown costume was, and he's the one that passed away. And in this article, it talks about this children's cancer ward, and she sees pictures of Bert in the clown costume. So she's like, okay, obviously he's still alive. He needs to know how to get it off. And he's in this costume and he's like entertaining children at this hospital. So now we cut to Bert, and Bert is in the hospital himself and his jaw is wired shut from this accident that he got in, but he is still alive. So Meg goes in and he's writing back and forth to her because again, he can't speak because his jaw is straight up wired shut. He got fucked up from this accident. So he asks Meg via writing, where is he? Obviously talking about Kent, and Meg lies and says, I don't know. And Bert says, only I can help him. And she asks him, like, this suit does things to people. And Bert says, yes, and you can't trust him. Do not trust him. Like, he is no longer your husband. And Meg keeps asking him, how do you get the suit off? How do you get the suit off? And he won't answer until finally she holds up that picture of him and is like, how did you get it off? Like, your fucking cover's blown, buddy. I know you did this shit. He just doesn't answer her. And eventually Meg gets fed up and she just leaves. She's like, fuck you, you're a lost cause. And she walks out. So Meg ends up going to Marty Carlson's house, the house where the suit was found. And she sees the chest. And near this chest, she sees a chair with restraints. So it has like chains on it and it has an area for your wrists to be held in. And in front of this chair, she uncovers a camera on a tripod. And she goes to look in this camera and watch the tape. And she sees in this tape something walks by and she kind of gets startled for a second. And now as that's happening, we cut to Jack, the little kid who, again, poor innocent Jack, like he's just an innocent bystander. He just wanted a fucking clown for his birthday, which, like, kids, if you're listening, this is what happens if you like clowns. I'm half kidding. Like, you can like clowns if you want, but just know that they can turn into demons. So anyway, we see Jack at school and these bullies are once again making fun of him about like his dad. And they're like, oh yeah, your dad's a clown. Like, fuck you. Which, like, kids will bully kids about anything these days. Like, what if that was his actual job? Like, let him be, brother. So these kids end up cornering Jack, and one of them is literally about to assault him, which Jack is 7, by the way. These kids look way older, not way older, but old enough. And Jack just straight up bites one of them and runs away, which, like, good for you, Jack. Do what you got to do. So now we cut back to the house and we see Meg watching that video, and she watches this person who we assume to be Marty tying up this clown. And this clown, again, we assume to be Bert because we knew that he was in the costume before. And he looks like he's in full clown form. Like, this thing is scary as fuck. And he ties this clown up in the chair, and the clown looks way more aggressive and demonic. And the video is like super blurry and pixelated. And that's really all that we see. So we don't see what happened after that, but we know for a fact that Bert was the clown and now is human again. So there has to be a way. So meanwhile, we cut back to Kent downstairs and he throws up more blood and teeth as he's chained in the basement. And now Jack comes home upstairs because he ran home from school after this, and Kent hears him. So Jack's upstairs calling out for his mom and Kent hears him, and Kent then calls for Jack. And Jack is like, Mom said if I saw you, like, I was supposed to tell the teacher. And Kent's luring him to the basement. Now he's like, she's not here. Come downstairs. I need help. So we know this is not fully Kent. This is the cloyne coming through. So eventually Jack goes downstairs and we cut back to Meg and we see that she gets a call from Denise. And she's like, did you pick up Jack from school? Because I just went to go get him and he wasn't there. So Meg panics and she rushes back to the house because she knows what's up. So Kent ends up saying to Jack, like, I need help. And Jack is crying because, again, this is his father. He doesn't know any better. So Jack's crying and he tells his dad, like, oh, these kids were bullying me at school, which, like, is just so sad. Like, this poor kid is trying to cry to his dad, who was a fucking demon clown. Like, Jack cannot catch a break. And Kent asks him who was bullying you, and Jack tells him the kid's name, Colton. And he says to Jack, get the bolt cutters for dad. And we don't see what happens next, but spoiler alert, he does get the bolt cutters and let who he thinks is his father out of this trap. So Meg ends up rushing home, and when she gets there, she sees the basement door wide open, and she's calling out for Kent, she's calling out for Jack, she's completely frantic, and eventually she finds Jack, she hugs him, and she's like, where is daddy? And we cut to Colton's house. So, I mean, I'm not saying if you bully people, you deserve to be eaten by a demon clown, but like, karma's a bitch, you know? So we cut to Colton's house and we see this kid playing video games and he's home alone. And now behind him, we see Kent creeping in through the kitchen, of course. And Colton ends up going in the kitchen a little while later and he sees that the door is open. So he grabs these nunchucks thinking that that's going to fucking do anything for him, this scrawny little prepubescent boy. And he asks who's there. And of course, nobody's going to fucking answer. And eventually we see Kent come up behind him in the hallway and Colton turns and sees him too. And he's like, Mr. McCoy, like, what are you doing here? Is Jack here? As if you would be fucking nice to Jack anyway, bitch. And Kent obviously doesn't answer, but he simply starts walking towards Colton menacingly. And this whole time we can hear Colton's friends on the video game talking to him and they're talking shit about Jack. Like, grow up. You're talking shit about a 7-year-old boy, you fucking losers. So he hears them talking shit about Jack and like what Colton did. Like, oh yeah, Colton cornered him, like that weirdo. And Kent hears this and he simply lunges at Colton full force, and we cut to like where the TV is, where the video game's on, and we just see like an organ fly into the camera and this blood splatter everywhere. So R.I.P. Colton, maybe you would still be alive if you weren't such a dick. So we cut back to the house and we see that Meg is actually taking her father's advice and they're going to stay with him, and she's packing, she's getting her and Jack's shit together when all of a sudden she notices that the dog got out. And did you forget about the dog? Because the dog is still here. And she looks and she eventually finds him and sees that he is growling at her. And it's not even just a regular growl. Like, they must have distorted this dog's face with CGI because even the dog looks scary as fuck. It has this like scowl on its face and it just looks not natural. And the dog starts walking towards her and Meg gets so scared she's backing up and she falls, and the dog goes to lunge at her and bite her when out of nowhere Bert shows up and fucking decapitates the thing. So yes, I'm sorry, a dog died, but the dog was also possessed. Like, the dog was part cloyne or like full cloyne at this point. So Bert shows up and Meg's like, you just killed my fucking dog, like, what are you doing? And he's like, the thing fucking attacked you. Like, sorry, kind of had to. And we look at the dog and we see that where it was decapitated, it's not bleeding normal blood, it's bleeding a rainbow liquid. So again, obviously this thing was the cloyne. And Bert once again says to her, like, I'm the only one that can get that costume off. You need me. So Bert tells her, he's starting to explain like what happened and how he got out of the costume. And by the way, he like unwired his jaw by himself because we now see him with pliers unwiring the rest of it. So he unwires his jaw and he eventually tells Meg, I found that costume by accident and I had a shop and it was in a shipment from Iceland and it came from some estate sale. And when I opened it, everything in that case was rotted with the exception of this clown suit. So I was going to sell it, but I wanted to put it to good use first because my brother was a doctor and he worked in a cancer ward with kids, and we thought that it would cheer the kids up. And once I started to transform, I asked my brother for help, and he told me that he swore that he would find a cure, and that's the last thing I remember. And when I woke up, the suit was off and the curse was broken, and my brother gave the demon what it demanded. And it turns out that he found 5 of the children in the hospital that were close to death, and he fed it to the cloyne, 1 child for every month of winter. And that's the cure. So essentially he's telling Meg that she needs to feed Kent 5 children. Technically 4 because he ate Robbie. Well, technically 3 because he ate Colton. So she's only got to find him 3 more kids. Well, of course, she doesn't really know that at this point, but she's about to find out. So Bert goes on to say how my brother never left his house. He literally guarded this costume with his life, and I've spent my life trying to find out how to break the curse permanently, because if somebody puts on the suit again, it just restarts. And they tried to destroy it. They tried to burn it. They tried to do everything. The thing simply cannot be destroyed. Even the smaller pieces, the smallest piece of it will carry the curse, and then they kind of look at the dog. So that's what happened to the dog. Because it ate the nose, it got the curse as well. And Bert tells her, like, you have to cut off its head and you can't destroy the costume, but you can destroy the demon. And Meg is still like kind of in denial at this point. She's like, my husband would never do that. Like, this isn't possible. But eventually, Bert finds a bone or some piece of a body in the garage or something. And he looks at it and he's like, it looks like this belongs to a child. And Jack eventually shows up and he tells Bert and Meg that Daddy went to Colton's. So at this point, they know where he is. And Meg explains to Jack, like, Daddy's suit is making him do bad things. Like, this isn't him. And Bert looks at Meg and is like, help me catch him. We'll lock him up and we'll continue searching, like, for a cure. So we see Meg getting in her car. Her dad shows up. He's trying to get her to stay, but she ultimately ends up leaving. And the two of them go to Colton's house. And of course, they find Colton's mutilated, bloody body on the floor. And most of it has been eaten by the cloyne. So at this point, they're like, okay, we need to find where he went next. And Bert says, well, where can a clown go where he's not going to be seen? And Meg has a realization and she's like, oh no. And we cut to this arcade. And in this arcade, there's like a birthday party going on. There's a bunch of kids everywhere. And we see on the door, like the back door to this arcade, there is a bloody handprint on it. So the cloyne is now, he's got full reign, baby. He is surrounded by these fucking kids in here. So Meg and Bert end up going to the arcade, and Meg looks at Bert and she's like, you can't go in there like that. Like, you look like an escaped mental patient, which he kind of does because he's kind of like scraggly as fuck, period. But he also like just opened his wired shut jaw and is like bloody and looks like a fucking psychopath. So Bert's like, okay, I agree with you on that one, but don't trust him. Like, if you love him, you'll do what's right, but just do not trust him. And Meg says, I will bring him to you, I promise. So she goes in. Again, she sees this birthday party going on, and we see like a kid in the ball pit, which those things are fucking foul anyway, but the kid obviously feels something wet because he's like, oh, somebody peed in here. Spoiler alert, it's not pee, it's fucking blood. So we cut to this little kid who's up in like the plastic slides, and he's obviously looking for somebody. He's calling out for his brother, and he runs into this little girl who just tells him, don't go up there, talking about like up further into the slides. And again, because none of the kids in this fucking movie listen, he completely ignores her and goes up there anyway. And as he's going up there, we can see that there is like bloody handprints and blood splatter all over the slides on the inside. So the cloyne has got to these kids, and we see this clown, and he is cornering this child, and the kid who's looking for him, it turns out the child that the cloyne is cornering is his brother Greg, who he's looking for. So he yells at Greg and he tells him to run. So the cloyne instead goes for the kid that was just trying to find his brother and eats him instead. So we had to play the hero, and he just got fucking killed for it. So the cloyne, by the way, is now like almost in full clown form. Like, this does not look like Kent at all. You would never be able to tell that it was Kent or that it was even a fucking human. Like, he is scary looking. So Greg ends up escaping, and he slides down and he tells his mom what's happening. And as he is, all of this blood and these organs start coming down the slide into the ball pit. So that's what had been the wetness earlier. And everybody starts screaming and everybody's running, and it's just utter fucking chaos. And now Meg is walking in during the chaos, and she asks a woman what's going on. And the woman is like, there's a maniac dressed as a clown in there on the loose. Get your kids. And everybody's running out. And of course, Meg's running in because she knows that this is her husband. So Bert ends up going inside anyway, and he meets up with Meg, and somehow he has an axe. I'm not sure where he acquired this axe from, if it was like a BYOA, bring your own axe situation, but he has an axe. And he ends up meeting up with Meg, and they follow a blood trail, and it brings them to this like weird like blue light forest play area, like an animated forest. And Meg ends up finding Kent again in almost full clown form at this point, and he's crouched down in the corner, and Meg goes up to him and is like, we're gonna find a way to stop it, we gotta get you out of here, Bert is gonna help. And Kent looks up and is like, I remember him. He's crazy, talking about Bert, because like Bert already tried to decapitate him once. And as he's saying that, of course, Bert goes back on everything he promised and comes in swinging with the fucking axe. And he goes to swing, but he misses. And Kent ends up knocking him down. And Meg is still trying to be like, no, like he's going to help you. There's got to be another way. Like she's freaking out. And Kent just looks at Meg and in this demonic voice says, bring me a child and you can have your husband back. So at this point, it's obviously not Kent speaking to her. It's the clone speaking to her. So bring me a child and you can have your husband back. So Meg cries. She's devastated. And the clone just looks at her and says, if you're not going to bring me one, perhaps I'll find another. Jack, I think his name is. So now he's threatening her. Like, if you don't find me a kid, I'm just going to eat your fucking son, bitch. So he once again looks at her after he says, like, basically threatens her with eating Jack, bring me a child and bring it to our favorite spot. I'll be waiting. So now it's this weird, like, Kent clone hybrid, because obviously Kent would know where their favorite spot was and the clone wouldn't necessarily, but this is mostly the clone coming through at this point, and Kent is pretty far gone. So Meg ends up leaving and she leaves Bert with the axe and he's like all bloody, and the cops end up running in and they see Bert with this bloody axe and they assume it's him and they fucking detain him, like they drag him out. So Meg's dad ends up calling her and she tells him, like, take Jack and leave. And her dad is trying to get answers, like, what did Kent do? And Meg's trying to play it off like nothing. He didn't do anything. And now Meg is sitting or standing in the parking lot amidst all the chaos. There's cops, there's ambulances, there's kids crying, parents crying. And she sees this kid standing there by himself. And she goes to approach this kid. And we obviously know the reason she's approaching a kid alone is because she's trying to find a kid for the clone. But as she's approaching this kid, his mom suddenly comes up out of nowhere and grabs him. So her plot has been foiled for this one at least. And she ends up sitting in her car and she's listening to the radio, and the police are saying on the radio, like, they confirm that there were 2 child fatalities at this arcade and we have 1 suspect in custody, Bert Carlson. So again, they think that it was Bert that did this whole thing. And as she's listening to this little girl knocks on her car window and she rolls down the window, and this little girl is like, please, I can't find anybody. I remember you from the dentist office and I remember that you were really nice, and can you please drive me home? I don't know where my mom is and I don't know what else to do. So this poor little girl is desperate and she goes up to Meg for help, and Meg ends up agreeing, and we know what Meg's actually agreeing to. So this girl gets in Meg's car and she's driving down this like old dirt road, and she ends up pulling over and she tells the girl, like, okay, this is it, you're home. So this little girl goes to get out of the car, like believing her. And as she goes to get out of the car, it's when she looks around and realizes, wait, this isn't my house. And Meg closes the door and locks her out. And she's just looking at this little girl. The little girl starts to panic. She's like, it's scary out here. And Meg obviously is looking like she regrets it because she doesn't want to be fucking doing this. Like, this is a little kid. And eventually, after a while of the girl like crying and begging to be let in, Meg ends up regretting it enough to open the door, and she tries to pull the girl in. And now again, another stupid kid in this movie. Like, the girl was just crying and begging to be brought into the car, and now Meg is opening the car trying to pull her in, and the girl's like, no. Bitch, then stay out here and get eaten. I don't give a fuck. Sorry, maybe that's harsh, but regardless, it happens to be at this exact moment that a cop pulls up. I don't know what the fuck a cop is doing on this old abandoned road, but this cop pulls up and ends up like saving the little girl and tells Meg to wait here. And Meg obviously is like, fuck that. And Meg drives off. And it's at this point that Meg realizes that the clone is not interested in another kid. It's interested in Jack. So Meg at this point says it out loud. She's like, oh, Jack. And she speeds home. So she calls her dad to tell him to get Jack. He doesn't answer. And we see her dad at their house pulling up to the house with Jack. And they're going inside, and the dad is saying like, oh, let's go talk to your dad. Like, bitch, Meg specifically said, do not go to my house. Like, why can't you fucking listen? Like, you were supposed to take Jack to your house and this would have been fine. But no, he has to be nosy and get involved in this whole situation, and he's going into their house to confront Ken. So they get into the house, and Meg's dad finds a bone on the floor, probably the same bone that Bert had seen earlier. And at this point, Meg pulls up to the house, and she runs in, and her dad is there, and Meg is like, I told you not to come here. But again, her dad can't fucking listen, and her dad is like, I don't want you implicated in this. Like, I'm gonna help. I'll clean up the blood. So like now all of a sudden the dad is willing to be an accomplice in one of Kent's crimes, like, even though you fucking hated him this entire movie. And as he's saying this, it doesn't even matter because Kent comes up behind him, now fully as the cloyne, and rips his jaw off from the back and kills Meg's dad directly in front of her. Like, oh, you thought Kent was bad before? Now he's the cloyne, bitch, and he just killed you. Like, you wasted a lot of time hating on this man for no reason. So now the cloyne, is in full clown mode. And again, when I tell you it's fucking scary, it is scary. If you're watching the video of this episode, I'm going to see if I can edit in like a photo of it here. Not to be a jump scare, but I just want you guys to get the full effect of what this actual fucking thing looks like because it's scary. So this cloyne comes up to Meg and it growls. And in its growl, in this demonic voice, it says, "One child more." And now it starts chasing Meg because obviously she makes a run for it. And Meg like slips in this blood, but she ends up getting into the garage and grabbing a sledgehammer. And as she's doing that, she sees Jack coming down the stairs, which, like, again, why are the kids in this movie so fucking clueless? Like, hide somewhere, bitch. Like, don't come downstairs. So she sees him coming downstairs. And then as she's going towards him, Kent pops out and Meg like hits him with the sledgehammer, but he grabs it and he throws it and he grabs her by the neck and a fight is ensuing between the two of them. And he like lifts her shirt and he starts digging his fingers into her stomach because, again, remember, she's pregnant and obviously the cloyne knows that. And Meg starts yelling and eventually she yells for Jack to run. And we see Jack attempting to run, but the front door, he's too short to reach the lock. So he simply cannot open the front door. So he runs into this other area of the house where there's like construction or something going on. We see like there's stairs being built or something. And of course, the cloyne is not far behind. So it's turned its attention from Meg now to Jack and it's chasing him. And Meg, of course, follows and she grabs a knife and she slashes the cloyne with it, but he bites her shoulder and throws her into the wall, which causes her to become unconscious and she falls to the ground. And as she's now completely incapacitated, we see Jack hiding underneath these stairs. So he goes into this area, the construction area, he's hiding under the stairs and he sees the clown approaching. And the clown approaches this little hole that he's in under the stairs and starts grabbing at him. But Jack gets back far enough where the cloyne can't reach and he ends up pulling his hand back. And now we see Meg wake up. She's slowly getting up, slowly coming to, and Jack goes to leave from his hiding place from under the stairs, which, again, not really sure why you want to do that, but he can't leave because the cloyne ends up pushing this like material, this building material in front of the opening. So now he's stuck inside the stairs and Jack can hear footsteps going up the stairs. And sure enough, the clown suddenly starts to break through the stairs with his fucking bare hands. So he's breaking through the stairs, he's reaching for Jack, he's trying to go for him when all of a sudden Meg shows up behind him and wraps this chain around his neck from behind. And she like locks this chain on something or attaches it to something, so now he's completely stuck and the cloyne cannot reach Jack. And he's tied up and he starts to pull so hard in an attempt to get Jack that he starts to decapitate himself. So that's kind of the whole point of this because Meg knows that the only way out at this point is decapitation. So he's pulling on this chain so hard that it is starting to cut into his neck physically, but he's still going. So his neck starts to bleed. Meg picks up this sledgehammer and approaches the cloyne. And as she goes to swing it and deliver the final blow, Kent comes through. It's Kent's voice, and he just starts saying, "Help me." And again, at this point, like, what do you do? Like, yeah, that's your husband, but there's also this evil thing that's trying to kill your child, right? And Meg tells Jack, go get the book. Like, go get the book that Bert had with the fucking clown shit in it. Go get the book and more chains. And it's Jack at this point, finally a kid that's rational and logical, because Jack just says, "Why?" And Meg is like, "Don't you want to help Daddy?" And Jack just says, "That's not Daddy." And at this moment, the cloyne knows that he's lost, that he does not have them on their side, on his side, not like it doesn't matter what he does to try and manipulate them. And he lunges at Jack. And at that moment, Meg snaps out of it and she swings the sledgehammer at him and smashes his head. And she thinks that it decapitates him because his head is mostly off. And we see this pool of rainbow blood shoot out as the cloyne lies on the floor dead. Or so we think he's dead, because Meg goes to hug Jack and we get our final jump scare of the movie because the clown comes back and grabs Meg because it's not fully decapitated. It's still hanging on by like literally a few threads of its neck. And Meg at this point has just had enough and she straight up grabs his head and pulls it off with her fucking bare hands. And this thing finally is decapitated. It's finally been defeated, and it starts to leak this rainbow fluid. And eventually, the head and the rest of the clown body, the costume, begin to disintegrate. And it reveals Kent's head and Kent's body. So he was still in there underneath all that. And the only way out was to decapitate him. So Kent has now lost his life because he tried to be a good fucking father. Like, that's so devastating. So we reveal Kent's head, and we actually see that the costume is still fully intact. So like the wig and the makeup has melted away, but the costume itself is still intact. And we see Meg and Jack hugging, and obviously they're going to be traumatized for the rest of their lives. And now Meg has to have a baby without a father. It's really fucking devastating when you actually sit and think about it. But they hug, and we end up focusing on Kent's head, and we hear sirens sounding in the distance. So, of course, as with most of these movies, the cops always show up at the worst possible time because now everything's over and you are fucking useless. So thanks for coming now. So the final shot that we get of the movie is this body bag being zipped. Of course, we know it's Kent's body in it. And as we pan to the side, we see the wig, and we see Kent's wallet, and we see his keys and his wedding ring, and all of this stuff is being put into evidence bags. And we pan past the evidence bags, and the final one that we see is a bin with the clown costume in it, fully intact, and the movie ends. So this is one of those where honestly it has the potential to have many sequels, because in reality, like if the clown costume cannot be destroyed, this could go on forever. And I see a lot of potential in that. And this is one where I would actually love a sequel because, again, like the idea of this, I think is so terrifying. And this image of this clown is so downright terrifying, like this demonic clown. Like I have Art the Clown and Pennywise on my wall. Not that they're not scary, but like I would never put the clown on my wall, bitch. Like no fucking way. So fun fact that I liked about this movie, Vivienne Westwood, who is like a very prominent fashion designer, was actually originally set to design the clown costume. Like what? But she ended up having to design the wedding dress for Carrie Bradshaw in the Sex and the City movie. So she moved on to some bigger and better things. So instead, the person who designed it, actually, it says is undisclosed. So that actually kind of adds to the creepiness level of this whole thing because we don't even know who the fuck it was. And also just to illustrate how creepy this clown is, in Italy, the movie posters for this movie had to be censored because the clown was deemed as being too scary. Yeah, bitch. Yeah. So there you guys have it. That's Clown from 2014. Eli Roth worked on this movie. And again, I think it is a very underrated clown movie. I find like people don't really talk about it when we discuss clowns in horror. And I think it deserves its spot because it is by far one of the, if not the scariest clown there is. Like, yeah, maybe he's not as brutal as Art the Clown, so he gets it in that way. But like Art the Clown, like you would look at and laugh. The clown you're looking at and straight up crying. I'm curling into a ball and dying. Again, if you want to check this movie out now that you know what to expect, it is still streaming as of today, which I'm filming this on December 27th. It is still streaming on Netflix, so check it out. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Were you able to see me? Do you like a video episode? For like the extra episodes, I'm going to try and do this because for the extra episodes, I'm really just going to focus on like one movie, and that's much easier to do than like when we do Terrifier and we cover all three. So I'll probably do the video episodes for like the extra ones because it'll be a bit easier on me for editing purposes. But as always, you guys know where to find me. It's horror_chronicles on TikTok and Instagram. My next episode will be coming out on Wednesday. And again, we will be covering all of the Terrifier movies, Terrifier 1, Terrifier 2, and the very beloved Terrifier 3. So until then, again, you guys know where to find me and watch more horror movies and stay spooky, my friends.